Welcome to episode 6 of our 12-week journey, and where we take 4 volunteers on a swing change adventure using only the power of this channel and weekly video submissions. This week we saw a huge change for one of our volunteers and is getting my hopes up for this series, but only time will tell. This is something we will continue with. If you do like this content to get some education out of it, please consider liking, sharing, commenting, or even subscribing, as we donate profits from this channel and our development centers in Southern California to the Heal the Hood Foundation in South Africa to help introduce low-income children to golf. But enough of that hurricane. Get ready to witness the improvements on our great volunteers. Alright, first on the screen we have Harrison. Harrison's old motion's on the left side, the new motion's on the right side. We're going to take a quick little look and see the differences between his first week versus now, which is week 3 for him. What we're going to do is look at the initial setup. So the one on the right, the newer one, looks like it's more of an iron setup, where his left side has a little bit more weight, but he still hasn't lost that connection between his hands, his center of chest, and the golf ball. That's going to play a big role with how he distributes his weight. But the biggest change I see is the top of his swing. We're going to take it right to the top and look at the difference there. We see the hands are much more higher. We can see some spacing between the heads and the hands, and we can also see where that club shaft is. So we have eliminated some of this excess motion. That is really good, versus there, club is getting a little bit too far back. In relation to his turn, we can see his turn is about the same. So he's done a good job of limiting his hand position and keeping it more out in front of his chest. Now Harrison, I still see this lower back arch as a potential issue. So when you set up, try not to get too much of that arching in the lower back. Straighten it out a little bit. It's going to help you with your turn on the way through and prevent some lower back injuries. But what I want you to take a look at, Harrison, is when he gets onto the golf ball, your old motion of your hands falling behind that turn, we could see your hands here are still trapped on that right shoulder, and they have to catch up and increase their hand speed, and you start losing your angles and kind of flicking through a little bit too soon. This will make you increase your launch angle, plus it starts to decrease your carry distance. On the right side of the screen, we can still see that the whole body is moving left, but the hands are not keeping up with that chest turn. So in other words, the hand should already be down to here to keep up with that center of your chest. We can see now, as your hands get to where they should have been a few frames ago, they're behind the 8 ball. So we can see all the spacing between your hands and your right thigh. The club gets down to parallel off of your right thigh. It should be fairly close to that right thigh, or even some of the really good players get it at the golf ball. And you can see now you have to make up all this room right in the last couple frames, and that's where your hands have to go a little bit too soon, and that's where that little bit of a flipping action occurs. So a couple things can cause this is we take a look at your left hip action as you come on through. Your whole body's leaning left of that left hip, so try not to slide so much towards impact, and more just try and turn so you stay against that left brace line. And secondly, if you can increase your hand speed, which is basically your arms moving with your body turn instead of lagging behind. So those are the 2 things I want you to work on this week from this face-on view. Other than that, you did a really good job getting up to this point. So next time we see you, which will be in 2 weeks time, let's see if we can narrow that distance between your hands and the center of the chest on the way down, and also not get as much lateral slide on the way into the golf ball. But really quick, let's take a look at your down the line to see if we see anything different there. Alright, Harrison, just down the line, old ones on the left side, new ones on the right side, 3 weeks apart. I know these views are from 2 different heights. One is a little bit lower, the other one's a little bit higher, but we're going to look at your plane work and how it is changing on the way down. So if we go to the top of your swing versus the top of the new swing, we can start to see a little bit of a difference there. Look at how the club on the old one is working its way back, and we did a good job of eliminating all that motion, where now the club is just sitting at the top, so there's less of that motion coming through. But on the left side of the screen, we can see it's slightly laid off. The right side of the screen, at least it is pointing somewhere near your target, so that is already much better. Now the biggest change here is, let's take a look at the action of that club shaft. So we see here that club shaft is working very far out to in and very steep, where now that club shaft, look at that thing, it's sitting pretty close to that golf ball, versus here it's inside of the golf ball. This is really going to help you with your direction control. And look at that club here, it is way out in no man's land, versus at least here we can see that club is sitting on that plane. So yes, these are much different, a lot easier to work with, so you don't have to fight those pulls and the blocks on the left side of the screen. You might still suffer from occasional habits, but one thing that's cool is look at this follow through. Look at how your arms went all the way past because they're playing catch up, where now look at your hands and arms is just stopping right at the top. So all in all, really good job. Just focus on what I mentioned on the face on view, but I look forward to seeing you next video. Let's see who is next. All right, next on the screen we have Philip. Now, Philip, thank you. Those videos were much longer, much better. They didn't cut out, and I don't know what it was before, but it worked now, so keep doing that same thing. So, Philip, I'm just going to compare your down the line and face arm from the most recent video because we actually have a full swing now to look at. And we're going to look at some of the things I still see a little bit of an issue with, and I know you mentioned to me you're about your strong grip, but it really makes sense if I show you what's happening. If we take a look at that golf ball, 90 degrees from the right shoulder is where it's set up to. Now, when you increase your forward press, so in other words, when your hands are leading ahead of that club at your starting point, what are you doing is you're increasing this angle between the club shaft and your right shoulder. Now, when you increase that angle, you are now putting yourself in an awkward position because you cannot quite release it naturally, and you have to hold off on that release. Pair that with a strong grip that's going to amplify that problem, and you're going to have very manipulative hands, or you're going to have to hold off the release by increasing your tilt and your turn, which most of us cannot do. So let's take a look at what you do. Let's go to the left side of the screen first. And I know you mentioned that when you increase your turns, you kind of lose the center of your swing. Now, keep in mind that with a strong grip, that is very easy to lose your center of your swing because your hands cannot release naturally. So that's one of the reasons why we're having you try and weaken that grip. So your two thumbs go straight down the shaft. Two V's that you create with your forefingers and your thumbs should be pointing just inside the right side of your sternum. So let's take a look at that plane work on the left side of the screen. As you take that club back, we can see that club face veering below your plane line, which is okay, but again, that's attributed to that left shoulder leveling out. So left shoulder again down to the right knee to help keep those hands lower and the club face higher. You won't have to manipulate your hands. It's again more of that one-piece turn. We get to the top of the swing, and we can see because you've leveled out your shoulders, look how low that left arm is. It's almost on your lower plane line that you set up, and the hands do tend to go back a little bit too far, but you have increased your turn quite a bit, so that's looking really good. We would like to see these hands a little bit higher, but that again has to do with maintaining your shoulder tilt. Now, some things can make it easier, as if you start it, you can stand a little bit taller, so we increase that spine angle, so when you turn, you can actually match that spine angle. So that's one way you can try and solve this problem. But overall, great turn. As we come down into impact, we can see the club face is still shut compared to your left forearm. You come on down through, you drop the club nicely in the slot, but because there's a lot of manipulation to drop it in the slot, that club head cannot stay in between these two plane lines, and it falls below. So one thing that can help you with that is, as your arms are coming down through, is you engage your turn to get your hand path to go with that turn. So your turn only starts right about here, so you can see that delay, and your club head is going severely inside to out, and you're doing all you can to hold off on that release. We can see there's no real release until about there, and then that's when you get that follow through. All in all though, your arms are definitely reaching that second plane line. You are what we call shaft humping, where you see your whole body going into the target there, into the golf ball, which is not ideal because that straightens out your spine angle. So we can see we're doing a lot of spine angle loss. So some positives I see, you're definitely turning more, which is great. Some things I want you to work on is getting that grip weaker and staying more connected to your center of your chest, and I'll show you on the right side of the screen what can help you. So let's just go to the top of the swing here. Now we can see how close this club face is. There is no way for you to release that club, but again, look at that turn. So you're getting a nice big turn, so this is great. We can see you're limber, we see you're able to do this. We just got to eliminate those hands and arms now by keeping you more one-piece connection like we talked about with that shoulder tilt level. Now let's go down to impact. We can see that club head is shut, so what we're going to do to try and block that is we're going to, like we said, shaft hump a little bit to straighten you out. The club's going to go so far inside to out, and we're going to hold off on that release. We can see your grip is actually stronger now than it was when it started. And keep in mind now, with your severe tilt that you have and your beautiful turn right now, look at where the hands should be, and they're there, but you've got all this extra angle that you've built up. Now remember, where you started, you increase that angle, so we don't need to increase that angle. It'll happen automatically, but because you've increased it so much, there's very little you can release. You can see when you release, that golf club will be so close by the time it gets to impact that you have to hold off that release. And we can see the left Velcro still facing at the target. It is just now turning over, and we see this hold of a release. So we can see that left elbow really pulling and braking to hold any sort of release open. Now, unless you can tilt even more and get your shoulders down this position and keep your hands out in front, then that setup would work for you. But because that setup's limiting your tilt, it is really hard for most people to do. So good job on the turn. Let's get those hands to be neutral, maybe even weaker for a little bit, and don't get that left shoulder to lose its tilting so much, and we can do that by two ways. We can stand a little bit taller at address, or we can just feel like our left shoulder is going down slightly to hold our spine angle. So I hope that helps you. I will see you next week for the other two volunteers, and we're officially in the halfway point. We've got 2 more lessons and then a recap. So if you like this, hit that like and subscribe and follow us along as we finish this journey to see if the lessons of the future are truly worth it, or if it's just opening a can of worms. Fairways and greens.